There is a unique and particularly devastating silence that exists at the epicenter of a life being irrevocably broken. It is a silence so profound it drowns out the world, the lapping of the waves against the pylons, the distant cry of gulls, the cheerful music from the yacht that was supposed to be our celebration. I stood on the splintered planks of my father's dock, the wood smooth and familiar under my bare, calloused feet, and felt the future I had so meticulously built with my own hands and heart disintegrate into ash. On board the Serendipity, a floating palace of polished brass and pristine white, was Julian, the man who had woven his dreams into mine for 3 years, whose voice had been the compass by which I navigated my world. And he was not thinking of me. He had stood on this very spot just hours ago, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of fire and gold, a cruel mockery of the passion I thought we shared. His hands, which had held mine so gently, were shoved deep into the pockets of his tailored trousers, his shoulders tense. Julian flashback, his voice strained, his eyes fixed on the horizon, unable to look at me. Mirabel, you have to see this from a perspective of pure logic. What we have, it's beautiful. It's authentic. But in the real world, authenticity doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't build empires. He spoke in the cold, sterile language of corporate boardrooms, dismantling our shared life with terms like synergistic alignment and strategic portfolio management. I stood frozen, the chill of his words seeping into my bones, until he finally turned to me, his gaze filled with a pity that was far more corrosive than hatred. Julian said, "Camilla Vance, her father, the Vance global conglomerate, it's an opportunity that defines a generation, Mirabel. It's not a reflection on you or what we had. It's about legacy, about building something that lasts. You and this." He gestured vaguely, dismissively at my father's modest, salt-weathered cottage, the small fleet of fishing boats, the entire world I called home. This is a liability. A beautiful, charming liability, but a liability nonetheless. Liability. The word did not just hang in the air. It embedded itself in my soul, a shard of ice that would never fully melt. My gaze dropped to my left hand, to the pale, naked strip of skin on my ring finger where his grandmother's delicate pearl ring had rested. He'd asked for it back. "It's a family heirloom," he'd explained, his tone implying that the family we were supposed to build was now an illegitimate branch, unworthy of such a token. As a fresh wave of agony crested within me, I felt the cool, familiar press of metal against my collarbone. My own heirloom. A simple, tarnished silver locket, its surface worn smooth by my mother's touch and now my own. Inside was not a photograph, but a single, faded word inscribed by her hand on a tiny scroll of parchment. Resilience. In that moment, the crushing silence within me did not break. It transformed. It crystallized into a structure of terrifying, absolute clarity. Julian believed he was leaving me with nothing. He was catastrophically mistaken. He was leaving me with a weapon and a purpose forged in the fires of his betrayal. The days that followed were a brutal education in public humiliation. I was no longer Mirabel, the spirited young woman who managed her family's maritime business. I was the dockyard darling dumped, the lead story in the gossip columns. The headlines were merciless. From fisherman's daughter to corporate cast-off, and Vance heiress snags CEO, leaves local girl in her wake. There was a grainy, long-lens photo of me, red-eyed, hauling a crab pot, juxtaposed with a glossy, perfect shot of Julian and Camilla Vance, her hand adorned with a diamond the size of a quail's egg, smiling from the deck of the Serendipity. The world saw a simple, tragic story. The poor girl from the wrong side of the harbor who couldn't keep her man. They had no idea they were witnessing the origin story of something else entirely. My father, a man of few words whose wisdom was etched into the lines of his face by sun and sea, found me one morning in the small office above the boat shed, surrounded by ledgers. I wasn't crying. I was staring at my mother's locket, lying open on the desk, the word resilience seeming to pulse with a faint, internal light. My father said he only ever saw the surface, Mirabel. He saw the peeling paint on the cottage, not the strength in its timbers that has weathered 100 storms. He saw our old boats, not the generations of knowledge in their helms. Your mother, she never saw scarcity. She saw potential sleeping in every grain of sand, in every tide pool. She could look at a piece of sea glass, battered and broken, and see the beautiful, unique jewel it had become. He placed a dust-covered, leather-bound journal on the desk beside the locket. It was my mother's. I had seen it my whole life, but had never dared to open it, fearing the pain of her absence. With trembling fingers, I opened the cover. What I found was not a chronicle of grief from her illness. It was a logbook of genius. My mother, a brilliant, largely self-taught marine biochemist, had spent over a decade documenting a unique bioluminescent microorganism endemic to the protected, deepwater coves of our family's stretch of coastline. She had discovered a proprietary, sustainable method for cultivating these organisms, believing they held the key to a revolutionary, organic, cold light technology. She had detailed notes on its properties. It required no external power source, produced zero heat, and emitted a stable, ethereal, blue-green glow that could last for decades. She had named her discovery Aethelight, from an old word for noble light. The final pages contained a rudimentary but visionary business plan, a dream of building a company that would light the world without harming it. Then, the entries stopped. The cancer had taken her before she could bring it to life. This journal was my true inheritance, not the locket, but the legacy it symbolized. It was not a comfort. It was a summons. It was a declaration of war against the world of cold, hard cash that Julian had chosen over me. He had left me for a prepackaged fortune. I would build my own from the very sea he had turned his back on, a fortune that would outshine his in every conceivable way. Transforming my mother's theoretical work into a commercial reality was a battle fought in a converted storage shed that stank of salt and seaweed. I poured every cent I had, the money I'd been saving for our wedding, for a future that was now a lie, into second-hand lab equipment, vats, and filtration systems. I was no scientist, not like her, but I was her daughter, and I was now fueled by a ferocious desperation she had never known. The first 18 months were a brutal parade of failure. Murky, foul-smelling water that grew nothing but slime. Faint, sickly glows that sputtered and died within hours. I became a ghost in my own life, a pale, hollow-cheeked specter haunting the shoreline by night, my hands raw and stained, while the society pages chronicled Julian and Camilla's lavish engagement party and their power couple tour of European capitals. The turning point arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet email. Desperate, I had scanned and sent key pages of my mother's journal to a handful of marine bioresearch facilities. One reply stood out. It was from a Dr. Heiress Thorne, a name I recognized from the footnotes of my mother's journal, a brilliant but notoriously reclusive bioengineer. His response was terse. Your mother's methodology was sound. Her strain is unique. I am arriving on Thursday. He appeared exactly as promised. A tall, gaunt man with a severe countenance and eyes that held the sharp, assessing light of a raptor. He toured my makeshift lab, his expression unreadable. Dr. Throne, Ilara's work was visionary. The world was too short-sighted to see it. It seems to be a family trait, this stubborn pursuit of the improbable. He picked up a beaker of my latest failed culture. Your technique is sloppy. Your notes are emotional. But the raw material is pure genius. Let us see if you have the discipline to match your mother's intellect and your own considerable motivation. Under his ruthless, exacting tutelage, I ceased to be a grieving daughter and became an alchemist. We didn't just cultivate the algae, we engineered it. We isolated the most robust strains, perfected the nutrient solution, and created a stable, vibrant, and endlessly self-replenishing biological light source. We named our company Aethelight, a direct descendant of my mother's Aethelight. It was a name that spoke of ancient strength and pure radiance, a stark, poetic contrast to the harsh, impersonal Vance Global. Our first major breakthrough was a contract with a visionary architectural firm in Dubai. They used Aethelight panels to create the interior skin of a new, hyper-sustainable luxury hotel, entire walls and ceilings that breathed with a soft, living, natural luminescence. The project, dubbed the Heart of the Ocean, became an international sensation. Press from around the world descended. Aethelight, illuminating the future with nature's blueprint, from coastal cottage to global game-changer. The river of capital began to flow. It started as a trickle from the Dubai contract, then became a steady stream as luxury brands, tech firms, and city planners clamored for our technology. I did not buy a yacht. I did not build a mansion on a hill. I reinvested every single dollar, every euro, every yen back into the company. I was constructing a fortress, not of stone and mortar, but of light and innovation, and its foundations were being laid silently, deep beneath the notice of the world Julian had chosen. 5 years to the day after Julian shattered my life on the dock, a courier delivered an envelope to the Aethelight headquarters, a sleek, modern complex built on the very land where our old boat shed once stood. The envelope was heavy, made of cream-laid paper, so thick and textured it felt like woven silk. It was an invitation to the annual Vance Global Philanthropic Gala, the most exclusive event on the social calendar. The theme, printed in elegant, raised foil, was charting a brighter future. The irony was so perfect it felt less like coincidence and more like destiny. But it was the enclosed note, written on personalized stationery, that truly set my heart thrumming with a cold, focused energy. It was not from Julian. It was from Camilla Vance herself. To the remarkable Mirabel, it began, in a flowing, arrogant script. One cannot move in the circles of innovation without hearing the whispers of Aethelight. You have, against all odds, carved out a rather charming niche for yourself. We would be so delighted if you would join us at our gala as our special guest. My father's investment board is always keen to explore promising, disruptive ventures. Perhaps we can discuss a brighter future for us all. It was a masterpiece of condescension, a power play designed to co-opt my success, to frame my empire as a charming niche they were magnanimously considering for acquisition. They believed they were inviting the talented, upstart prodigy to kneel before the throne. Dr. Thorne advised me to decline, to continue our work in silence until we were untouchable. My father worried it was a trap designed to humiliate me all over again, but they were thinking defensively. I saw the opportunity with the clarity of a predator. They saw a disruptive venture. I saw the final, exposed flank of their empire. I penned a gracious, elegant acceptance. Then, I summoned my chief financial officer and my head of corporate strategy to my office. The silent siege I had waged for 5 years was about to become a very public, very final conquest. The night of the gala, I did not arrive in a rented limousine like other guests. I arrived in a silent, obsidian-black vehicle from a Swedish hypercar manufacturer, in which Aethelight was now the majority stakeholder. My dress was not a flamboyant couture piece designed to scream for attention. It was a deceptively simple, floor-length gown of deep midnight blue, woven with microfilaments of Aethelight that created the subtle, mesmerizing effect of wearing a living, star-strewn galaxy. At my throat, the only jewelry I wore was a new locket, a flawless, teardrop-shaped capsule of solidified Aethelight, glowing with a soft, internal radiance, a modern phylactery for my mother's enduring spirit. I walked into the ballroom, a gilded cavern of old money opulence, a world of crystal chandeliers and champagne towers. And then I saw them. Julian, his boyish charm now layered with the softness of a life of luxury, his smile looking strained at the edges. And beside him, Camilla, a vision of calculated elegance in stark white, her arm linked possessively with his. The moment I crossed the threshold, a ripple moved through the crowd. The murmurs of conversation dipped, then surged anew. It was not the pitying whisper of 5 years ago. It was the hushed, electric buzz of awe and curiosity. I was no longer the girl from the docks. I was Mirabel of Aethelight, an enigmatic queen entering a court that suddenly seemed garish and outdated. Camilla detached from Julian and glided towards me, a tight, polished smile on her lips, Julian trailing in her wake like a handsome, uncertain shadow. Camilla Mirabel, you decided to come, and you look so distinctive. Your little company is quite the conversation starter. My father's analysts have been pestering him nonstop to make you an offer. I told him it was merely a matter of finding the right price tag. Julian eyes flickering over my dress, my face. The glowing locket, a storm of confusion and something that looked like regret in his gaze, he said, Mirabel, you've changed. His words were a pale, pathetic echo of the man I once knew. I offered them a smile, a small, serene, and utterly impenetrable curve of my lips that did not reach my eyes. I said, "Camilla, Julian, it's a fascinating evening. I was particularly struck by your theme, charting a brighter future. It's a concept that has become the very core of my life's work." Before they could formulate a response, the master of ceremonies, a silver-haired titan of industry, stepped onto the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests," his voice boomed through the hall. "Each year, we use this evening to recognize a visionary, an individual who embodies the spirit of innovation and progress. This year, we are privileged to honor a woman who is not just following the future, but actively building it. Please welcome our guest of honor, the founder and CEO of Aethelight, Mirabel." The applause was not polite. It was thunderous, a wave of genuine admiration that washed over me. As I walked past Julian to approach the stage, I paused for a fraction of a second, leaning close so my words were for him alone, a whisper that cut through the cacophony like a shard of ice. I responded, "You were right, Julian. It wasn't about love. It was about legacy. You just made the gravest error of your life. You bet on the wrong one." I ascended the steps to the stage, the spotlight causing the Aethelight in my dress and locket to blaze with an ethereal, undeniable power. I looked out at the sea of faces, my gaze finding Camilla's, her smile now frozen into a rigid mask of shock, and Julian's, his face a canvas of dawning, gut-wrenching horror. I said to the audience, "Thank you. 5 years ago, I was told that my world, my heritage, was a liability, that it was not practical. So I dedicated myself to building a new one, not on the shifting sands of finance, but on the enduring principles of sustainability and natural brilliance. Aethelight was born from that conviction. And tonight, as we all look toward a brighter future, I am thrilled to make a landmark announcement that will ensure that future is a truly integrated one." I paused, letting the silence build, feeling the anticipation thicken the air. I tapped the small remote in my hand. The massive, high-definition screen behind me, which had been displaying the Vance Global logo, flickered and changed. For Aethelight to truly illuminate the world, we require unparalleled global reach and infrastructure. We believe in acquiring the tools to build that future. Which is why, as of the close of markets today, Aethelight has successfully acquired a controlling 52% stake in Vance Global. The gasp that erupted from the crowd was a physical force, a collective intake of shock that sucked the air from the room. Camilla's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Julian looked as if he'd been physically struck, the color draining from his face so completely he looked like a marble statue of his former self. In the front row, old Mr. Vance, Camilla's father, slumped in his chair, his hand clutching his chest. I did not look at them. I did not gloat. I finished my speech, my voice never wavering, outlining a visionary future for the newly merged entity, a future where Vance Global's infrastructure would serve Aethelite's purpose. I had not come for a confrontation. I had come for a coronation. He left me for a fortune, so I built a fortune so vast, so powerful, that it could effortlessly devour his whole world. As I stepped down from the stage, I did not walk towards the exit. I walked directly towards the newly appointed chairman of the Vance Global Board, my employee, to discuss the first orders of business for my new subsidiary. The girl from the dock was a memory, a ghost. In her place stood the woman who now owned the harbor, the sea, and every glimmer of light that reflected upon it. The whisper of struggle had been silenced forever, replaced by the roaring light of a legacy reborn.